Good afternoon, students. I'm Jesus Petrina, your English 1 tutor. I'm here to give you the presentation on the subject content, and I will touch a little bit on what you might expect in your examination, either April, August, or November, those who are going to write the supplementary one. Okay, we start with the materials that you need during your study. There is this very crucial book which is called Latrin and Pincus. It's written in 2010, English Handbook and the Study Guide. This book is more on grammar, part of speech, all the parts of speech, you can find them there. There is a study guide for English Module 1. This is a very big book that you always get it when during the day of your registration from your IOL office. Everyone's supposed to have this one because most of the questions or more about our subject, it's in this book. There is this last one, which is Thompson, 2001. This one is more on teaching methods, the English teaching methods. You can find them here. How to use teaching aids, how to teach parts of speech. You can find them in this book. Try to have this book as you are preparing for your examination. All right. We start with summarized guide. This is what I have now tried to summarize up the guide, the whole study guide for you. But there are a lot of things that I did not touch. So you advise to get your study guide and read it through also, as you have this one aside. There are two forms of language, formal language and informal language. Informal language is now divided into, in different parts. Informal language is divided in different parts, where one of it is emotive language. What is an emotive language? This is a very important point for you to master. Emotive language is an example of informal language. Emotive language can be either subject or object, fact or opinion, denotation or connotation, bias or prejudice. These are the types of emotive language that you need to know. You must understand what is subjective, what type of idea or facts that we say they are subjective. There are facts and there are also opinions, denotation or connotation, bias or prejudice. Let's talk about this point one by one. Let's start with subjective. Subjective is a personal and based. If somebody said, so she's so subject, means she's too much on her own idea. It is one-sided point of view. Here is an example. And always once you meet this type of questions where they ask you to either to define or to explain, always try to give examples just to let me know that you understand exactly what you are saying. An example of subjective is informal as part of emotive language. I think she is clever than all of the classmates. So this one is just somebody's idea that she thought, but it might not be true that she's the cleverest person in the class than other classmates. So this type of sentence or this type of opinion is what we call that they are subjective, they are personal based. We proceed. Objective. The objective information has the ability to be counted or described and does not vary. Can you see that? Once they say that one is an objective idea or it's an objective, so it means that one can be confirmed, can be counted, and one can describe it by looking at it. We move on to denotation. Denotation is the strict dictionary meaning of the word. You met this type of definition in your assignment, and I have just realized that most of you have answered it very well, and I'm happy with that. And if you can just try to read more on your assignment sheets or assignment script on these things, as the marks are also there. Of course, there is no any other way that you can go wrong in your examination. Denotation is the strictly dictionary meaning. So what is exactly is in the dictionary. So that one is what we call is the denotation. Why connotation? Connotation is the emotional and figurative association surrounding a word. So this type of connotation, this type of things that we put around the word, just to make what we are saying more interesting. This type of things is what we call connotation. Here is an example of a connotation. Tina's participation in the competition was a walk on top of water. Can you see that? So one really need to think more harder just to understand what exactly this person is trying to say. So if you look at the difference between the two, denotation and connotation, you can really see that denotation, the person is saying exactly using the words that as they are in the dictionary. It's the meaning is very straight. But connotation, you have to think and see what is the person is trying to say by looking at the words that the person has used and the connotation that surrounds those words. All right, we move on. Bias or prejudice. These are also part of emotive language and informal language. Bias or prejudice is referred to a personal preconceived belief, not based on evidence or fact. So we all have our belief in some issues or some point, and this type of belief is what we call it prejudice or bias. For example, let me say if a person is saying men are good leaders, so that one is just a belief, maybe our belief, our African belief, but not really that men are good leaders. Women can be also good leaders. So that one is just being biased or prejudiced. So these are the factors or types or points under emotive language, and emotive language is part of informal language. Okay, the other point that I want us now to understand here, and I wanted to make it clear to you, is that learning a language is a very difficult thing. And there are many factors that surround a person or a child or a learner when he or she is learning the language. These factors are like social factors, cognitive factors, psychological factors, and so forth. Let's now look at these social factors. What are those social factors? Social factor is the social environment where the child lives. The house environment or the school environment or whatever environment the child is living or the learner is living is very important in language learning. And how this one is important then when it comes to social factors. A child who is in the house where maybe the parents or the sisters or the brothers do not do much of the communication with that child, then the language development of that individual will be low. But a learner or a child who is in a social environment where communication is very high, parents are talking much to the child, the sisters and the brother are communicating very much to that individual. So that one will pick up a lot of words, will pick up a lot of vocabulary, and the language learning or language development will be fast. Social factor social interaction increase the vocabulary of children and enhance their language development. This is what just I have said, that interaction, when you are interacting with learners, for example, let me say now in our case, in our country, the grade 1 to 3, it's home language. Learners are learning in medium of instruction is home language. And once these learners now move to upper primary, or let me say to the senior primary, grade 4 to 7, they are now, their medium of instruction is English. And this is just a transformation between their home language and the medium of instruction now, which is English. Teachers in English class need to talk, to interact more with these learners, just for learners to pick up a lot of vocabulary, just for language development, for these learners to go fast. This one can be done in different way, and we are going to talk about these factors that can increase the language learning in learners, when learners are now moving to a new medium of instruction. We are going to talk about this later in our presentation. There is stories. Stories are good tools to use in teaching reading. This one is a belief that stories are good tools to use in teaching reading. Let's see now how these stories are good tools for teaching reading. One, how can a teacher can do this one in a class? A teacher can ask learners to read a story and rearrange the jumbled phrase or sentences. Can you see? If you read a story to your learners, maybe it's a page or a paragraph, you read it to your learners, just for you to see that they have understood or mastered what we have read to them, and they were concentrating in what we are reading. Put up a sentence on the board or wherever you put it, mix it up or jumbled it up, and ask them to rearrange those sentences. Of course, you know, learners they like reading, or they like stories too much. They like stories so much, and then this is the best way to make them concentrate or to be listening to whatever the teacher is reading to them in the class. Scan for specific information. These are the activities that you can give them once you finish reading a story to them, or maybe they were reading to each other. The activity that you can give them, you can ask them to scan, find out specific information, like, for example, find out the verbs from the story, or find out what the meaning. You underline some words, and then you say they must find the meanings of those new words. Those are some of the activities that you can give to your learners once they read the story. And again, you must read about this different way that we can use as teachers to make our learners love reading. This is, in most cases, I put it in the questions as how to cultivate the culture of reading in our learners. What are those points? Don't always just stick to the points that I have listed up. Use your own idea. Come up with different ideas apart from the one that are in your study guide. This one, in this case, you make yourself grow when it comes to your language, your subject content. How can we do this one now? Ask learners to bring their favorite books to school. Learners have their favorite books at home that they read at home, that the parents bought for them, or maybe they got it from the community library. Ask them to bring them at school. Have a reading corner in your class where learners, especially the first one in your class, once they finish doing whatever activity that we're doing in a class, send them to that reading corner. And then this also will be encouraging our learners to finish a class task very fast, because they know once they finish, they will go and enjoy themselves at the reading corner. You must also read aloud to your learners. Find one of the reading book, read it to your learners, And then, of course, in that way, you are cultivating the reading culture in your learners. There are a lot of points that you can come up with under this topic, but here I just gave you the hint, and you must build on that one. There are different ways of maintaining order in the class. You know, in most cases, teachers we're being challenged by this, controlling our classes. Once the class is not in order, once the learners are not behaving in the class, then of course teaching will not be successful in that way. It will disrupt everything in your class. No matter how well you prepared, as long as you cannot manage or maintain order in your class, then your teaching will not be successful. What are those ways that we can use to maintain order in our class? Here are some examples. Have a poster on the wall or somewhere in your class where you have displayed the class rules. And you read those class rules with your learners, and you must also explain to them the consequences as one maybe disobey one of those rules. What should be happen? What will be happen after that? And you must always be consistent. Once you know that you put up that once you make noise in the class, this is what will happen to you. Make that every learner that will make noise in the class, that particular activity, I don't want to say punishment here, it's done. Keep learners always busy. If maybe you are busy marking your learners' activities or whatever you are doing, don't let learners to be alone on their own in the class. Keep them busy with other activities, or send them to the reading corner, or give them reading books so that they can be reading while you are finishing whatever you are doing. Don't learners to be on their own in the class. It's very disruptive. Names of the disciplined learners can be always displayed on the class wall every Friday. This one is just one of the motivation that learners can be done in our classes, just to motivate learners to be disciplined. So maybe every Friday you have a list of learners who behaved very well in the class throughout the week. You put them on the wall. Everyone passing by there will read it. Of course, all the learners, every learner will now want to be her name or his name to be displayed on the wall, and they will behave in the class. They will not want to break any of the rules that are displayed in the class. Okay, there are a lot of points that you can come up under this topic. I said these are just stimulation. The answers that I'm putting up here, just stimulation, just to guide you which way should you go. Okay, another point, another topic that I want us to cover here is spelling. You know, most of the learners struggle with spelling words, English words, or either mother tongue words. Now, how can we overcome this one? How can we overcome this challenge? There are different ways that teachers can employ in assisting learners to spell correctly. What are those now ways that teachers can employ in their classes? One, learners should be exposed to different reading materials frequently. Reading, as I said, we were just talking about reading culture. Reading improves spelling of the learners. The more the learner reads, the better their spelling become. Let's send our learners to the library whenever we are not busy with them in the class. They send them to the library to go read different books. And in that way, they are getting exposed to different new words, and their spelling improve. Teacher can use spelling game. Spelling game is one of the spelling teaching strategy. So you can use spelling games just to teach your learners to spell. There are a lot of different spelling games. If you can just maybe go on ABC Teach or Google, you can get a lot of spelling games there. Those are the best way or strategy that you can use to teach your learners how to spell. Okay, now there are this what we call TQLR strategy, which is used to prepare learners for listening activities. Here is just an explanation of what TQLR stand for. T, tune in. Q, question. L, listening. R, review. This one is a strategy which is used to prepare learners for listening activities. And now, tune in. What is tune in mean? The listener must tune in to the speaker and the subject, mentally calling up everything known by the subject and shouting out all the distraction. This one is just a way of preparing once you are now in the class and you plan to do the listening activity that day. Of course, you have to make sure that there is no disruption around, so that when learners are listening, so there are some distractions that are behind them and they couldn't pick up exactly what the reader is saying, or what is the radio, whatever they are listening to is saying. Question. The listener should mentally formulate questions. What will this speaker say about this topic? What is the speaker's background? I wonder what the speaker will talk about. Of course, once you introduce, maybe the learner, you brought a speaker to your class. Once that speaker standing in front, learners will have some question in their mind. They will even infer what is the topic all about. Those are the types of things that we want when it comes to listening. And this is what we call TQLR strategy. Listen. The listener should organize the information as it is received, anticipating what the speaker will say next and reacting mentally to everything heard. So for you to see that the person is listening, it's only when that person is reacting mentally to everything that the speaker is saying. Review. The listener should go over what has been said, summarize, and evaluate constantly. Main ideas should be separated from the subordinate ones. So this is reviewing now when the learners maybe they were listening and they were taking some notes or summarizing. So this is the reviewing part where they have to now to summarize and evaluate what they have heard. And the idea should not be scattered around, should be arranged or organized in the way that, of course, one can read it and understand the coherence of the idea which is on the paper. We move on. Now we move to the way of creating good learning environment in our classes. A language class should not be plain. The wall of the language class should be full of different learning aids or learning materials, a special reading task where learners, even the teacher is not in, learners can sit in the class and be able to read what is on the wall and keep them busy. The first point is ritualized and patterned. Positive teachers' behavior influence performance. The teacher should be a positive role model at all times. Constant and varied exposure to new learning and encourage quicker and deeper learning. So teachers we should be role model to our learners. If you want your learners to be good leaders or to be good readers, you must read to them different types of material or reading materials. You must do whatever you want your learners to do. And also, we must, of course, I know we are in the country where we don't have a lot of reading materials. We have a lot of challenges when it comes to reading materials, but let's try with our almost best just to find out different reading materials. Don't let your learners to read just one book throughout the year. Find out different reading materials, either from newspapers, magazines, and expose your learners to different reading materials just to create a good environment for them, and also cultivating culture of reading in your learners. There are these two terms in our course, which are called simulation and role play. Most of us, we confuse these two. We confuse simulation and role play. Simulation and role play, these are completely two different terms. Let's just look at this one. What is a role play? A role play is when a person or a learner is acting as if he or she is someone else or something else. The person is acting. While simulation is when the learner are acting as if they are someone else or something else. But in this case, the learners can bring items to the class to create realistic environment. I just gave you an example of, let me say, maybe learners in your class. The simulation is about a singer. In this case, the learner has to bring all the equipment or different equipment that singers use, like microphone and so forth. So that one is simulation. While the role play, a learner can just act as someone else, but not necessarily that they'll bring the equipment or other resources that are need those type of people that they are acting out use. Okay, another point in our book, it's ways of creating learners speaking confidence. This one is a challenge in most of our classes, especially these first grades. When I say first grade, in this case, I refer to grade 4, grade 5. Those are first grade at our senior primary level. These learners are now moving from mother tongue to English. And when it comes to English lesson, they don't want to speak in English because their vocabulary is poor, or perhaps they are not just comfortable to speak in front of others. How can we now create the confidence of speaking in our learners? There are a lot of points that you can put up here, but I gave you a hint here where you should build from. One is use only English in your class. Once you put up that rule that no one should speak in mother tongue in our English class, of course, learners will try to put together words just to make up sentence for them to be able to express themselves. But if you allow them to speak in their mother tongue, they will not try to speak English because they know a teacher will just understand what I'm saying. Learners should only respond in English lesson. Learners must use English inside and outside of the classroom. There should be a lot of talking in the class. Even it's a reading period, or perhaps it's a listening period, also put in some, use some minutes for speaking, just for the learners to practice and be used to speaking in the class. So speaking should be done a lot in the class, just to encourage learners to speak and build their confidence in speaking. There are these terms that appearing in our subject many times, and I just want you to know the definition or what do they mean. In case you meet this one in your paper, you know. Of course, you cannot understand this subject if you don't understand the definition of these terms. These are the basic language skills that most of the children acquire before entering schools. We have terms like phonology, morphology, syntax, and semantics. These are most of the terms that are used in our subjects when it comes to language development. Syntax, this is the way the words, the meanings of the words. Semantics is more on sentences. So I just list up this one, and I refer you to study guide Is in the study guide, they are well explained, and you can, once you read, you can understand them more in detail. Let's move to communicative language approach. You know, in our schools, we are using learner-centered. And when I just realized when I was busy marking your assignments that you are confusing this learner-centered approach with language communicative approach. Of course, these two terms are not different, more different from each other, but they are not the same. What is communicative language approach? Communicative language teaching makes use of really life situations. Are you getting that point? That communicative language teaching make use of really life situation that necessitate communication. For example, let me say maybe in your English class, it's a speaking lesson. If you put up a picture on the wall, for let me say maybe it's for an animal, a dog, and ask learners to say something about that, learners will have a lot of words to say because they are looking at the picture. They are looking at the really thing. But if you just say the word dog and say learners should say it, of course they will say something about the dog, but most of them, they will struggle to put the words together, just to come up with even the character of the dog. But once they are looking at it, they will have a lot of things to say. And this is what we say, we call communicative language approach. Teacher set up a situation that students are likely to encounter in the really life. Communicative approach leaves students in a suspense as to the outcome of the class exercise, which will vary according to their reaction and responses. Really life situation change from day to day, and students' motivation to learn comes from their desire to communicate in a meaningful way about the meaningful topics. If maybe I can refer this one in the past, those who have done this, what we call traditional method of teaching. So you were given a list of things, just for example, let me say the words or the verbs that we have to memorize. And this is what now we have moved away from, and we move to this one, communicative approach, where you are given a really life situation. Even if a verb should be in a paragraph, a verb should be in a sentence, where you are inferring now which one is a verb by looking at the context where it's used. This is what we call now the communicative language approach. Okay, we move on. Now we are moving to common features of standard language. Common features of standard language: a recognized dictionary, standardized spelling and vocabulary, a recognized grammar, a standard pronunciation, educated speech, a linguistic institution defining usage of norms. Here we have some examples: constitutional or legal status, or we can say frequently as official language, effectiveness, public use, for example, court and school and so forth, a literary canon, convenient speaking, popularity of acceptance in the community and population. These are the common features of standard language. We know standard language. Standard language is a language that is it's measured to be the best. So these are the features. If I ask you to give me some features or characteristics of standard language, so these are the features of it. We move to importance of being proficient in English in Namibia. This one is a very good question. I like it because, of course, we have a lot of points as to why we need to be proficient in English in our country. Some points one can put up is, for example, English is the official language in Namibia. Every office that you enter, you speak English. So that's why we need to be proficient in English so that we can be able to communicate once we visit different offices in our country. At the university level, English is one of the requirements. You cannot go to qualify to go to the university if you don't have the symbols that they need for you to be enrolled in there. So English is one of the requirements. English is used as a medium of instruction in all the school government, or in all the government schools in Namibia, grade 4 to 12. We know about that. It's not a news that in our government schools, English is one of, it's a medium of instruction where every child need to be proficient in this one, to be able to answer questions, to be able to communicate with teachers, and so forth. So just come up with enough points on why we need to be proficient in English. Your guide have some guideline on this point. Lesson planning format. In our schools, we have different formats. When we talk about format, we mean the form that you use when you are planning a lesson. These lesson formats are different from school to school. But there are common things, there are common terms that every lesson format has. For example, goals or objectives, what you want to achieve at the end of your lesson. Accommodation, how you should accommodate, or in some lesson format is it's written as inclusive. So these are the you need to know the common terms that are in a lesson format. For example, goals, learning competencies, teaching aids, introduction, and conclusion. Those are the things that every lesson should have. All right, we move on. Okay, it seems we have approached the end of our presentation. This is the last slide, but I encourage you that this presentation is aimed to assist you with your preparation for your April, August, and November examination. And don't pinpoint, but read everything, because you don't know which one will be asked, you don't know which question or which topic will be asked in April, and you don't know which one will be asked in August or either November. Try to go through your whole study guide, and if you have some challenges, don't hesitate. I always say this one. My number is there. Call me. Of course, I will assist you. Thank you.